Hello, everyone. Welcome to Synergy Assessments. First, we're going to start by kind of your getting there, the way around there, and then getting into naming conventions and how to then create questions and assessments, and then giving it to your students and having a final product to be able to assess your students on. So you can see once we're in Synergy Home, we can, under assessments, is where we're going to live everything lives. So dashboard is where your current um, Synergy assessments live, and you'll have four tabs on there. Your schedule, you scheduled, is assessments that you personally scheduled for your own students. This is not coming from district. It's coming ones you've made that you've given, and it'll live there. Currently, I don't have anything scheduled. Scheduled for your classes, that's where ones from your curriculum coordinator or from district or wherever it's coming from will be placed in those. So basically, somebody else is scheduling it for your class, and they'll live in there. And you can see there's my assessments all living there. Um, this is exactly what every page on here will look like for the your scheduled and completed. But these come from somebody else scheduling it for you. Completed is once you schedule it for your students to take, and then they take it, and then once the scheduled time is off, then it's completed. And we'll talk about scheduled times and stuff like that later on. But this is just a brief overview for you. Assessments is where all the assessments that you have access to live. Um, so you may have created one and you just wanted to keep it there and you don't know when you're going to give it. You just know you're going to give it sometime. You can create it at any time and it'll just live in assessments. And then you can leave them there at any time and then go schedule them. And once again, we'll talk about how to do that later. Um, but this is every assessment that you have access to um, that you can schedule. So that's what assessments is, your overall assessments, full quizzes, tests, whatever you want to call them, that you have set up. That's where you can find those. Items are the questions. So you can see this is one multiple choice question. And I've got a bunch of them, but this is the actual questions. So you will take these and put them into assessment. So when you see assessment items, when you go there, you're only looking at questions. You're not looking at full assessments. Passages, that's going to be for an advanced class, but passages is just um, if you have one part of, if you have maybe a picture or a story that you want to have a lot of questions on, you would make it the picture as a passage, and we'll get into that, like I said, a little later. But you can see here's my deck card question, and then I'll have 4 or 5 questions after that. So what you do is you make a passage, and then you would make questions that go with that passage, and we'll get into that later. Constructed response grading. That's where when students do something that you have as a constructed response, you could actually go there to grade. And then bank management. So every um, assessment needs to live in a bank. And you can see I named all my banks. Um, I named all my banks. When it's private, that means only you can see what's in that bank. So whatever assessment you go in there that you have private is only you. If you share your bank, then other people can see those questions in that bank. And then you'll also see shared with me, so people shared their banks with me. Um, but it's a little confusing in this area. When you go to your banks, you can see names and who you want to share with and everything, but you cannot see everything in that bank, in the bank um, in the bank management. You can't see every assessment that you have in the bank, so it's a little confusing in that area. um, but you can see naming convention, or you can see the name. And this is where I'm going to talk about naming him. Oop, this one, sorry. Um, this is how you will name your you can name your banks whatever you want as long as they're for you. But when you're talking about assessments um, and banks, you want to follow these guidelines. Let me make this a little bit bigger here. Oop, that was not what I want to do. Let's do that. There we go. So when you're doing it, so if your curriculum coordinator asks you to um, make an assessment for everybody in the district, um, you're going to name it. You can see here it's used by anybody in the district, designed by us who creates it, and then when you name it, you're going to name it as GUHSD, and then have a hyphen, then what course it is. So for me, I'd say like honors geometry, and then what unit, one lesson. So here's another one: GUHSD, Enviro, um, Hydrosphere. Okay, that's for if you're using it for everybody. You want to use GUHSD, and something we went to this year. We actually at the end of that, and this is not required, but at the end of that, you could put the year like 1920, because you can use these assessments from year to year to year to year to year. And if you edit them at all, you can make a copy, and we'll talk about how to make a copy. You can make a copy of it so you still have last year's, but then this year's, if you don't want to change the name, if it's still GHSD Enviro Hydrosphere, but you just edited one or two questions or things or something like that, you could just put the date for the school year that you're using. That way you can keep track of them. But once again, that part is optional. But if you're doing it for the district, it has to have GUHSD course unit lesson in there. If you're creating it just for your PLC, the suggestion is school course unit lesson. So instead of GUHSD, you're going to put your school. So AHS English 34 Mockingbird, or for me it'd be AHS geometry, trigonometry or whatever it is. But that way you know, and your PLC members know that this is for your school. It's not a district thing. It's for your school and um, your PLC. And then if it's by you, you should use first and last name, um, course, unit, lesson. So basically, the only thing that's changing in naming them is either it's GUHSD, it's a school, or it's you. And once again, you can, when it's just you and you're the only one's going to use it, you're the only one's going to see it, you can really name it whatever you want. It's suggested like that because you can upload them into your gradebook. When you upload it in a gradebook, and this is for individual assessments, not banks. These namings go for assessments as well as banks. So if you are going to put it for just your students and then put it in your gradebook, when you upload it to your gradebook from Synergy Assessments, whatever name you have on the assessment will show up on your gradebook. So if you were to, for example, say, welcome survey, and you were going to put that into your gradebook, that might not be clear to parents that look at gradebook. So you may want to specify it as, you know, Jessica Coates, Algebra 1, welcome survey. That way they know it was by you and it was for your Algebra 1 class and it was a welcome survey for that. If you don't do that, you just call welcome survey. That's kind of open to interpretation. Oh, was that a welcome survey from the district? Did we not get that? Was I supposed to see, So that helps clarify a little bit. That's why you would want to do that. And like I said, these naming conventions are not just for banks. These are also how you would name the um, assessments as well. So that's a little overview. Last thing I want to show you in the overview is kind of what it will look like for you and what it'll look like for the students. So when you see this is an assessment And once again, I'll go over later how to get there and everything like that. But you're going to have all these choices that you can do, which I will go over, and then you're going to have all your questions here. So that's kind of just a quick of what, and you can see down here, I have all my standards that I have in there that I'm going to use, and then these are all my questions that I have in there. And then how it's going to look for a student when they log in. They'll start and they'll see one question at a time, and one question at a time, and one question at a time. So, and then here's a list of all theirs, and this is what it will look like as a student taking this. So that's just a quick overview. We'll get into more of how to create these.